Everyone telling me that the boys' comics are way better than the show is very wrong. Because boy, I can tell you, I've read the comics, and they are definitely the most Garth Ennis storyline you could ever want to read. Now, I don't know why you'd want to read that kind of story, but you sure as hell get it. Hello, and welcome to Homebrew Heresy, where we bring your heretical ideas to life in 40k. And as you can no doubt tell from the title, we're going to be building Homelander from the Boys TV show. Now, if you're unfamiliar with how things go around here, I'll keep it brief. First off, we take a character or a faction from a pre-existing setting or universe. We break it down to what makes them pop and make them unique, and we try to recreate that in 40k. So, you've got all that sorted out, let's get started by covering the lore of our favorite milk-drinking patriot with laser vision. While I do prefer to use the source material as much as possible, you no doubt could have guessed from my opening bit that it's not very good. Which is why I'm going to be sticking with the show for the most part for my info and lore. So with that out of the way, let's begin. Homelander was a product of the mega corporation Vought, wanting to bring a new and younger face to their personal superhero team known as the Seven. To do this, they had taken care of the previous face of the Seven, Soldier Boy, but not before using Soldier Boy's own DNA to create his replacement. Once Soldier Boy had been taken care of by Vought, the newborn Homelander, named John at birth, was raised within a sterile and cold lab, wherein he was conceived. During these early years of his life, the boy already possessed insane powers and even greater potential, and in an attempt to test the limits of their product, they conducted all manner of inhuman experiments on him, all intended to find out what, if anything, could hurt him. What he went through could only be described as horrific, as even if John couldn't get hurt from these experiments, the experiments still left him traumatized. What's worse, is this kid would further be deprived of love, attention, and even validation, only ever being shown any praise when he succeeded in mastering his abilities and adopting the teachings they fed down his throat 24/7. The doctor in charge of the operation even admitted to deliberately starving John of anything remotely close to positive feedback, and saying that he did it because Vought didn't want a hero, they wanted something to market their product, and that's what Homelander was always meant to be. What's really sad though is that even in spite of all this, Homelander was still kind and always wanted to be a hero. So, when he was finally ready, he actually found himself being sent out on a mission to stop a group of unhappy protesters. That being said though, the result would be catastrophic for everyone involved. You see, Homelander as a child actually experienced so much trauma, he actually began to develop what could only be considered a form of aggressive psychosis, wherein under extreme stress, Homelander actually kind of blacks out for a moment and begins engaging in extremely violent outbursts of fury and rage. Because of this, Homelander often has to shift between being cold and calculated to extremely aggressive and uncontrollable, with his outbursts actually sometimes being completely out of his control. Now, because of this little mistake that Homelander had occurred during his first mission, he actually began to learn something very important. He learned how easy it was for Vought to actually cover up his mistakes and how to talk to people. That being said though, that's not even going over how much Vought continued to manipulate Homelander even into his adulthood. You see, Madeline Stillwell, the current president of Vought at the time, spent most of Homelander's early life nurturing his Oedipus complex. Homelander wasn't born evil, but through his upbringing and the manipulations of a few twisted people and a life of isolation, he would eventually become the monster we would see in the show. When we see Homelander in the show, he's a very well put together leader of a team of heroes dedicated to protection of humanity, and even he makes a good impression on the new member of the Seven, Starlight. In reality, however, he's actually barely holding it together, at least mentally, as the death of Translucent causes Homelander to become paranoid. Combined with his desperate need to impress his mommy, he begins taking actions that would see everything around him break down, and see those he considers co-workers start to hate him. Homelander is one of the biggest pieces of shit I've seen in a long time, and that's what really makes him so entertaining. He finds himself very easily agitated and begins challenging everything around him. Now, that being said though, Homelander is also a very interesting character, because as he progresses through the series, you also see him change and develop, as well as break down mentally even further. Beginning first with the discovery of just the sheer trauma he underwent as a child, as well as the sheer neglect that the doctors who were in charge of taking care of him actually showed towards him. Actually meeting with the doctor who actually raised him, Dr. Vogelbaum, and hearing directly from him the sheer degree of callousness they expressed towards him, and the almost resentment they felt for him. And on top of that, his discovery that Madeline Stillwell had actually been deliberately manipulating him and lying to him, even going so far as to actually hide the fact that Homelander actually had a child himself, Ryan. This realization would actually cause Homelander to, for a brief moment, try to reconsider his life, and actually try to become a father to Ryan, nurturing his infant powers and raise him as a Supe. Unfortunately, due to conflicting relationships with Becca and his new partner Stormfront, this would actually see Ryan being taken away from his mother and be raised by the... how do I put this? the interesting character that Stormfront was, as well as Homelander. That being said, though, one of my favorite moments in the show that I'm going to mention is the fact that while Homelander is shown to be a monster, cold and callous and ruthless, he is to a point a father. As we notice that when Ryan actually begins becoming overwhelmed by his powers, he actually takes a moment to take his son away, showing a vast degree of empathy that he had not been shown as a child. That's where Homelander's story ends with season 2, and we pick up with him in season 3, wherein during the course of season 3, we see Homelander deteriorate even further mentally, as he begins lashing out at everyone around him and begins truly embracing his god complex. Over the course of season 3, we also see Homelander slowly be driven insane as the realization that he is not the strongest superhero in the entire world, as he challenges Soldier Boy, alongside the realization that Soldier Boy is in fact his father. Combining the realization that he is not the strongest, as well as the sudden discovery of his biological father, has actually caused Homelander to further deteriorate mentally. However, for the most part, that's where his story ends in season 3, with some minor hints of what he's going to do in season 4, which at the time of this recording should only be about 3 or 4 episodes out. However, if they're going with the story that we're going to see in the comics, I am very excited to see what's going to happen in season 5, because that is going to be insane. But at the end of the day, that's the lore on Homelander. Let's get started by covering his weapons and armor, which is kind of a misnomer because Homelander doesn't use weapons or armor. That being said, though, I will classify his powers and abilities as an extension of his weapons and armor. Homelander is a supe, meaning he inherently possesses superhuman abilities like super strength, speed, durability, and a healing factor. However, the most important power is his super hearing. I'm going to be honest here. One of my favorite parts of the show is how it depicts superpowers in real life, unlike Superman being able to hear sounds in space. However, I'd be lying if I said super hearing was Homelander's most used power. Actually, his most used powers aren't even his super strength or speed, but actually his flight and laser vision, the two most objectively laziest superpowers a superhero can have. Think about it, what takes more effort? Punching a target or standing 20 feet away and using your laser eyes to kill them? Why walk when you can fly around places? And honestly, my hope is come season 5, we actually see Homelander fly, not even walk anywhere, just fly, and fully embracing his god complex. But that's just a minor hope for me come season 5. Now, another weapon under Homelander's belt, if you really want to consider it a weapon, is his chronic psychosis I mentioned earlier. Homelander has, since a child, struggled to control his anger, and has numerous instances of him blacking out and unleashing violent fury onto anyone around him. Now, this might be considered a detriment, which I will consider it one. It's also an incredibly powerful benefit, as during these blackouts, he seems to have absolutely no control or remorse for anyone around him, and actually seems to almost go into berserker rage, which is almost terrifying to consider, given the fact that that means that we have not actually seen Homelander truly push to his limits in terms of what he can actually experience, both physically and mentally. Next, we're going to cover his methods of war. Now, methods of war for Homelander are kind of difficult to quantify, given the fact that Homelander doesn't exactly go to war. Well, minus what he did in season 2. But that's kind of inappropriate to consider a war, given he was mostly just a one-man army at that point, which I will consider a bonus in his case. Because Homelander, given the fact that he is a supe, is a one-man army. It's very simple and very direct, often simply walking into a building and killing everyone one at a time. Alright, with his lore out of the way and his methods of war covered, let's get to covering our goals. First, we're going to need to be some sort of modified individual, someone who stands above the rest of our faction or race, similar to how Homelander stands above humans and actually views them as beneath him. So throwing in a little bit of a god complex will also help. For a second goal, we're going to need to have some sort of superpowers, something that makes us different even among the members of our faction, something that sets us apart. So while I would consider this similar to goals 1, where goal 1 means we have to be modified, I would view goal number 2 as different, as goal number 2 simply means that we need to have some sort of unique power or ability. And for our final goal, we're going to need to be the leader of the 7, or at the very least some sort of appropriately named or appropriately equivalent combination of forces. So we need to have some sort of pedigree or sense of leadership or loyalty to our forces that allows them to bend the knee and join us in combat. Now, that doesn't mean that this loyalty has to be earned, as it could easily be achieved through fear and conquest. And I think really fits Homelander's style of leadership, given how he bullies everyone in the 7 and Vox as a whole. Minus Stan Edgar, who is by far the coolest character in the show. And with those 3 goals out of the way, we can now begin by finding out which one of our 3 major factions we'll be picking for this homebrew. So, to be totally honest with you guys, I was actually considering using the Eldar for a second, because I kind of enjoyed the idea of the Otarks and their fusion blasters being similar to Homelander and his brutal abilities. That being said, though, the Otarks, while they are incredibly skilled soldiers, they don't exactly fit with what I was imagining Homelander should be, especially his backstory. Given the fact that the Eldar actually have a pretty egalitarian society, and while it is a dark civilization, it doesn't have the same grime and brutality that we might see from Homelander or the Vought Corporation and the Boys universe in general. So as much as I actually kind of wanted to build a Xenos faction for this and use the Eldar, my boys, I'm afraid I'm not going to be using them, so that kind of rules them out. However, since we are looking for a degree of grunginess and kind of dirt to it, that does leave us with Chaos as an option. That being said, though, I can't see Chaos being that too similar to Homelander. I was kind of considering and tempting the idea of a demon prince and some kind of demon army, but that doesn't fit fully with Homelander because I actually had a better idea in mind. And I'll get to that right away. But before that, maybe give me an idea on what you prefer between the Demon Prince army or the one that I'm about to tell you. And again, you're probably going to get annoyed from me for saying this, but it is going to be an Imperium faction. I'll give you guys a second to write in the comment section below. And while you guys are down there, why don't you hit the subscribe button and maybe leave me a like? It really helps the channel out. Thanks. Now, Imperium factions. But not just any Imperium factions, because we're skipping right to Space Marines. Once again, write in the comments below, guys. I'm waiting for it. Now, you guys probably seem a little confused why I chose Space Marine for this homebrew, but it'll all make sense when I get to it. So, let's get started on deciding which one of our major legions we're going to be choosing for this homebrew. Now, initially, you guys might be thinking I'm going to be choosing one of the traitor primaries for this homebrew, maybe Magnus or Angron. But, I hate to tell you, you guys are quite wrong. I'm actually going to be choosing a loyalist primary for this homebrew, and I'm sure one of you has already guessed which one that's going to be. It's going to be Sanguinius, the Blood Boy, the Handsome Angel. That's right, we're choosing Blood Angels, or at the very least a successor of the Blood Angels to build this Homelander homebrew. Another thing I want to cover before we actually get fully in depth into this homebrew is a question that I've answered beforehand. When it comes to designing a homebrew based on a singular character, what exactly am I building in terms of a homebrew? Am I designing a particular character within the universe? No. While I am using Homelander the character as a baseline for designing this homebrew, I'll be generalizing everything we've covered to an entire faction as much as I can. So in this case, I'll be trying to generalize all the facets of Homelander we've covered onto a single chapter of Space Marines. While Homelander is a project of Vought, and by extension is an experiment, I think the best way to explain that and bring that into 40k is to look at a number of experimentations that were done on Space Marines. And given the fact that the Curse founding, the 2030 founding, is known for being one of the ones that were known to have the highest rate of experimentations on the Space Marines, it isn't uncommon for a successor of the Blood Angels to have been experimented on during the Curse founding. Another question, why am I choosing the Blood Angels for this successor? Very simple, Homelander's psychosis. Due to his psychosis and blind rage he enters, as well as his obsession with milk, comparing Homelander's love for milk with the Blood Angel's obsession for blood, alongside the black rage and red thirst, similar to Homelander's blind psychosis that he enters, as well as the fact that every time we see him after a battlefield, he's always drenched in blood and gore. So this is another reason why I think this fits. Now, what about his ability to fly and his laser vision? I'll get to that when I cover the types of box sets you should buy in order to build this army. But before anything, I think it's time we cover the lore of this homebrew. The Homelander's Space Marine chapter are successors of the Blood Angels created during the Curse founding and are known as one of the most brutal and uncompromising chapters of Space Marines. Their brutality in combat is second to none and is only ever surpassed by their unquenchable thirst for blood. They are known to often prioritize the drinking of blood and the consuming of flesh over the actual accomplishment of their mission. There are even some that claim they take a startling appearance to their founding legion, the Revenant Legion. Despite that though, they are known to possess an uncharacteristically beautiful trait, which only causes their brutal nature to be even further unnatural, as you might see an individual rip apart an enemy before consuming their flesh and blood in an instant. Additionally, the Homelander's chapter are known for their brutal ability to take territory, often ascending in drop pods or air assault, often descending onto the battlefield through the use of jump pack and drop assault forces, before absolutely decimating enemies in crippling decapitation strikes. Despite their brutal reputation, however, the Homelander's chapter are known as the unofficial leaders of the Seven. The Seven are a loose conglomerate of 7 Space Marine chapters, all aligned together under a single motive, the protection of the Vought system. These 7 chapters had all lent their forces to the defense of the planet Vought, a fortress world that had come under the attack of both Genestealer Uprising and Chaos Cultists simultaneously. The cult, led by the Butcher, led to the deaths of countless innocent lives. However, had it not been for the arrival of the Homelander's chapter and the coordination of these 7 chapters, the Butcher and his forces would have led to the destruction of the Vought world. The Homelander chapter, alongside the 6 other chapters that had joined forces, had all taken refuge on the planet of Vought, and have since all collectively begun recruiting from the world, using the planet's corporate dictatorship and militaristic structure to ensure the vast recruitment of forces for all 7 of their chapters. Additionally, members of the Homelander's chapter are known to have a higher chance of falling to the Black Rage and Red Thirst. This is believed to be a result of their creation during the Curse founding, as members of the Adeptus Mechanicus were suspected of tampering with the gene seed and actually causing the gene seed curses to become even more aggressive. This has actually led to something similar to psychosis, causing the 2 gene seed mutations to actually cooperate and overlap and build on top of each other. The Astartes of the Homelander's chapter do not see themselves there at Sanguinius' death, or even believe themselves to be Sanguinius at the moment fighting Horus, but instead members of the Homelander's chapter instead experience another vision. They experience the crippling torment of Sanguinius' body being ripped apart by the demons of chaos, constantly experiencing his torment and torture for all time as long as they remain under the influence of the Black Rage. This has driven many of them to not just be driven insane, but into a state of absolute catatonic unrest, causing them to scream in agony before shifting into maniacal laughter. For these Astartes that have fallen totally to the Black Rage and have been driven to this state of absolute unconscious rage, they have only one purpose. They are given a jump pack, a strap with a chainsword, and a melta pistol, and are told to charge into the heart of the enemy. Unlike other members of the Death Company, members who have fallen to the Black Rage in the Homelander's chapter are actually respected and venerated, viewing them as some of the strongest-willed individuals among the chapter. For only the strongest could experience the torment of Sanguinius' death, live through it, and use it to draw strength from. Currently, the Homelander's chapter has since refused the addition of Primaris Marines, and has instead slaughtered all of them and consumed their flesh and blood. And there we go, the Homelander Space Marine chapter. Successors of the Blood Angels and some of the most brutal warriors you'll see in the Imperium. Although, that's pretty much every Space Marine chapter. Now, a little clarification. The reason why I chose Space Marines is, again, because of their transhuman nature, actually causing them to view humans as secondary, if not an inferior species. And so I think this really fits with Homelander's god complex nature. Additionally, I think the use of melta weapons and inferno pistols really fits with Homelander's use of his laser eyes. On top of that, the jump pack really does fit with Homelander's ability to fly. And so I think this chapter prioritizing the use of drop pods and jump packs are some of the most important things in order to best fit the fantasy of playing Homelander. Additionally, I think a more aggressive Red Thirst and Black Rage really fits the type of fury we see Homelander experience when he enters his states of mental instability. Now then, let's actually cover what you need to buy in order to play this homebrew in 40k. And I really hate to tell you guys this, but this army is probably going to be one of the most expensive I've ever asked you guys to build. And again, this is just going for a 500 point army. So again, please forgive me. Although I'm pretty sure the Knight army I suggested you guys build last episode was a little bit more expensive, and this one's actually about the same price for a bit more points. So I mean, honestly, this one's not the worst I've built, right? When it comes to building the Homelander's chapter in Warhammer 40k, here's what we're going to need to buy. First off, for our Warlord, I chose Commander Dante. Since his golden gleaming armor, jump pack, and melta pistol really fit what we're looking for when it comes to epitomizing what we need for this Homelander's chapter, which is jump packs and melta weapons. That being said, though, Dante is infinitely nicer than Homelander. And we could always change him up to give him the whole blue armor color scheme, make him look very patriotic in terms of the American lifestyle. Next up, we're going to go for some Death Company Intercessors, which I personally wasn't going to suggest, but if I'm going to be completely honest, the points in this army are about 505 points overall, so I'm actually skirting over the 500 point mark. And Death Company Intercessors was the best I could make it to get as close to 500 as possible without having to rely on getting an Ancient or Astartes Servitors, and I don't want to use either of those. So we're stuck with Death Company Intercessors, but given what we cover in terms of the lore of the Homelander's chapter, Death Company Intercessors is kind of necessary, so I mean, I guess it fits. Well, together, these two things are pretty pricey. The next thing I'm going to have you guys buy, at least suggest you guys buy in order to fulfill the Homelander's chapter, is I'm going to have to suggest the Sanguinary Guard. 2 boxes in total, which I think really fits what we're trying to go for, given the fact that we need more jump pack units and more melta units. Unfortunately, Sanguinary Guard are extremely pricey, with 5 of them being an extremely high price, around $60 locally, which for 5 models is ridiculous. But I mean, it's Games Workshop and it's Warhammer, so I mean, everything's going to be kind of pricey. That's kind of how they make all their money. And it's another reason why I usually try to stick with combat patrols when I suggest building an army. But unfortunately, there isn't exactly a good combat patrol starting point for this army, especially if you're trying to emphasize the whole jump pack and melta weapons point of view. Now, while altogether this army does adequate to about 505 points, most people you play with aren't going to really care if there's just a 5 point difference, and those who do aren't exactly people you want to play with. And probably going to laugh at you if you try to bring a Homelander army to the game. Although I could easily be wrong, there are a lot of inviting people in the Warhammer community, and I could just be generalizing people I've played with. Now, speaking of playing, this is where we actually come to an even more fun part that I actually enjoy about homebrewing, and that's taking existing rules or concepts and reflavoring them to fit the setting or the thing that we're building. Now, luckily for us, Space Marines have a wide range of options when it comes to their army rules, unlike every other army. That being said, though, for those of you who actually watch my House Targaryen in 40k video, you guys might actually know that I plan on making a custom homebrew rule for every army that I cover in Homebrew Heresy. So if you guys want to see me actually try to make homebrew rules for every army I cover, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Now, until then, if I was going to suggest any one of the army rules that you guys need to pick if you guys really want to play Homelander in Warhammer 40k, I would suggest the Firestorm Assault Force, otherwise known as the Salamander's army rule. This one emphasizes the use of assault weapons, and this will actually make our melta weapons even stronger in combat. And so with that, I think we've got everything covered that we need in order to build this homebrew and actually bring Homelander into Warhammer 40k as a full-on tabletop army. And of course, feel free to let me know what you thought about this video in the comment section below, and let me know if you guys have any suggestions you guys want me to cover in Homebrew Heresy. And of course, thank you for watching, thank you for your time, bye!